Premonition. Chapter 1: Shadows of the Past. The first rays of dawn crept through the narrow cracks in the storage room window, illuminating dust motes that floated lazily in the air. Carol's eyes fluttered open as the faint light reached her face. She shivered under the thin, worn-out blanket, her body curled up on the small cot that had been her bed for as long as she could remember. The storage room, crammed with forgotten items and relics of her aunt's past, was both her sanctuary and her prison. It smelled of mothballs and stale cardboard, a scent she had grown used to over the years. Carol's morning began like every other. She swung her legs off the bed, her feet brushing against the cold, cracked linoleum floor. Reaching for the small alarm clock on the cluttered table, she turned it off before it could beep. The last thing she needed was to wake her aunt, Sheila, or her cousin, Mia. That would only lead to another lecture about being useless and ungrateful. Her daily chores awaited her. Carol quickly changed into one of Mia's old t-shirts and a pair of jeans that were slightly too long for her. Rolling up the hems, she tied her hair into a loose ponytail and tiptoed out of the room. The kitchen was silent, the faint hum of the refrigerator the only sound. Carol got to work, scrubbing the countertops, washing last night's dishes, and preparing breakfast. By the time the aroma of scrambled eggs and toast filled the air, her aunt's heavy footsteps echoed down the stairs. Sheila entered the kitchen, her sharp eyes scanning the room. "About time. I don't have all day, you know." "Where's the coffee?" she demanded. "It's brewing, Aunt Sheila," Carol replied softly, keeping her gaze fixed on the skillet. Sheila muttered something under her breath, grabbing a seat at the dining table. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her makeup immaculate even this early in the morning. She looked like the polished suburban housewife she worked so hard to portray, but Carol knew better. Behind the facade was a woman full of resentment and bitterness. Mia arrived next, her footsteps lighter and more carefree. She was the same age as Carol but lived in a completely different world. With her private school uniform perfectly ironed and her blonde hair cascading down her shoulders, Mia looked every bit the golden child. She ignored Carol, heading straight for the plate of toast on the counter. "Mom, can you drive me to school today?" "I don't feel like taking the bus," Mia said, already munching on her breakfast. Sheila smiled indulgently at her daughter. "Of course, sweetheart. Anything for my Mia." Carol watched the exchange silently, her chest tightening. It wasn't the first time she felt like an outsider in this house, and it wouldn't be the last. She finished her tasks quickly, grabbed her worn backpack, and slipped out the door before anyone could notice. The cool morning air hit her face as she walked toward the bus stop, a small sense of relief washing over her. School was her escape, the one place where she wasn't constantly reminded of her place in the world. At Southville High, Carol was just another student. Her classmates didn't care about her second-hand clothes or the fact that she rarely had lunch money. Most of them came from similar backgrounds, and there was an unspoken camaraderie among them. Her best friends, Anna and Jake, were waiting for her by the lockers when she arrived. "Hey, Carol. Did you finish the history homework?" Anna asked, her curly red hair bouncing as she spoke. Carol nodded, pulling out a neatly written paper from her bag. "Yeah. Here, you can look at it before class." "You're a lifesaver," Anna said with a grin. Seriously, you're making the rest of us look bad, Jake teased, running a hand through his messy brown hair. One of these days, you've got to teach me how to be as organized as you. Carol smiled faintly. Moments like these made her feel normal, like she wasn't just the unwanted girl living in her aunt's storage room. She cherished her friends and the brief reprieve they offered from her reality. The day passed quickly, and before long, Carol found herself back at the bus stop, dreading the walk home. The thought of facing her aunt again made her stomach churn. When she finally reached the house, she hesitated at the front door, taking a deep breath before stepping inside. "You're late," Sheila snapped the moment Carol entered. "There are dishes in the sink, and the laundry isn't going to do itself." "Yes, Aunt Sheila," Carol replied quietly, setting her bag down and heading to the kitchen. As she scrubbed the plates, her mind wandered. She thought about her parents, whose faces were now a blur in her memory. She thought about the life she might have had if they were still alive. Most of all, she thought about how unfair it all was. But she didn't cry. She had learned long ago that tears didn't change anything. By the time she finished her chores, the house was quiet. Sheila and Mia were upstairs, likely watching TV or talking about Mia's plans for the weekend. Carol retreated to her storage room, closing the door behind her. She sat at her small desk, pulling out a notebook. Writing was her solace, her way of processing the chaos around her. She filled page after page with her thoughts, her dreams, and the stories she wished were her reality. That night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, a strange feeling washed over her. It was a sense of foreboding, a whisper in the back of her mind that told her something was coming. Something that would change everything. For better or worse, Carol's life was about to take a turn she could never have imagined. Chapter 2: A Twist of Fate. The next morning began like any other. Carol had woken early, completed her chores, cooking breakfast and cleaning the kitchen, and was now walking to school. Her mind was preoccupied with her science test, the formulas and diagrams she had been memorizing running through her thoughts. Mia, however, had been acting strangely. She had left the house earlier than usual, muttering impatiently into her phone as she gathered her things. Carol caught snippets of the conversation, arguments, hurried reassurances, and a promise to be somewhere soon. Mia had barely looked at Carol, only pausing to snap, "Hurry up to school, will you?" before slamming the door behind her. Carol shrugged it off. Mia's moods weren't her concern, and she had bigger things to worry about. Crossing the street near the school, she was lost in thought, mentally reciting her notes. The sudden shout broke her concentration. "There she is," someone yelled. Carol turned her head just in time to see a car speeding toward her. Her mind went blank, her body frozen in terror. The screech of tires filled the air, and the world seemed to slow down. Before she could react, someone collided with her, shoving her out of the car's path. The force sent her sprawling to the pavement as the car swerved wildly, losing control. She watched in shock as it flipped over, metal crunching and glass shattering, before coming to a halt a few feet away. Everything was chaos: shouting, the wail of a distant siren, the pounding of her own heart. The person who had pushed her, a boy from her school, Robert, a senior she had seen in the hallways but never spoken to, lay beside her, his face pale and bloodied. Carol's vision blurred, pain radiating through her body, and then darkness claimed her. The police tried to find the cause of the accident. The car had been deliberately aimed at her, though no one could explain why. The occupants had died in the crash, and the police investigation had reached a dead end. Surveillance footage showed the car speeding toward her, but no further clues emerged. Chapter 3: Awakening. Robert sat quietly by Carol's bedside, the hum of the hospital machines blending with the faint sound of birds chirping outside the window. It had been 6 long months since the accident that had left Carol in a coma. His fingers gently worked the cream into her dry hands, the routine so familiar it had become almost meditative. He glanced up at her face, pale and serene, and let out a deep sigh. As he massaged her knuckles, her fingers twitched ever so slightly. He froze. "Carol," he whispered, his voice trembling. Her eyelids fluttered. At first, her eyes were unfocused, swimming in a haze, but slowly, they settled on his tear-streaked face. "Carol. You're awake," he exclaimed, his voice cracking as relief washed over him. He leapt from his chair, fumbling for the call button to summon the nurses. Tears streamed down his face as he rushed to call her grandparents. Within minutes, the hospital room was filled with people. Carol's grandparents arrived first, their faces breaking into joyful tears as they saw their beloved granddaughter awake. They clung to her hands, their voices a mix of sobs and jubilant prayers. "We thought we'd lost you," her grandmother cried, her voice trembling. Carol smiled faintly, but her head felt heavy, her mind clouded with unanswered questions. She could sense something had changed in these 6 months, but she wasn't sure what. Her gaze drifted to Robert, who stood quietly in the corner, giving her a reassuring nod. His presence was comforting. The door swung open, and Sheila, Carol's aunt, entered. Her face lit up in a wide smile as she walked in, but her eyes betrayed something colder. "Carol. You're awake," Sheila exclaimed, rushing over to her. She threw her arms around Carol in an awkward hug before stepping back, her eyes darting between the others in the room. "This is wonderful news. I'll start making arrangements right away to take you home with me." Robert's expression darkened. "Sheila, maybe we should discuss what's best for Carol. I've been here every day, and I think she'd be happier staying with me and my family. She needs love and care right now." Sheila's smile froze, then turned into a scowl. "Excuse me? Carol is my niece. My responsibility. You're just her late mother's friend. I'm her family." "Family?" Robert shot back, his voice rising. "In the past 6 months, you didn't visit her even once. Not you, not your husband, not Mia. And when I found her after the accident, she looked like she'd been working herself to the bone in your house. Her hands tell the whole story." Sheila's face flushed. "How dare you accuse me of neglect? You're just trying to take advantage of her. What are you after? Money? Some kind of guardianship scam?" Robert's hands balled into fists, but he kept his voice steady. "All I care about is Carol's well-being. This isn't about me." Carol's voice, soft and raspy, broke through the tension. "Stop. Both Sheila and Robert turned to her, their faces a mix of surprise and guilt. Carol looked from one to the other, her gaze lingering on Sheila for a moment before she closed her eyes. Her head was still spinning, her thoughts jumbled. "I don't want to be a burden," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Robert's face softened. "Carol, you could never be a burden. Not to me. Not to my family." But Sheila jumped in before Carol could respond. "Exactly. And that's why you'll come home with me. Family takes care of family." Her tone was syrupy sweet, but her eyes glinted with something Carol couldn't quite place. Carol's gaze shifted to the window, her thoughts swirling. Something about Sheila's insistence felt wrong. She remembered flashes of her life before the accident, long days of chores, cold remarks, and the weight of being unwanted. But the memories were still too fragmented to make sense of. For now, she would say nothing. She needed time to gather her thoughts and understand what had happened during these missing months. But deep down, a seed of doubt about Sheila's intentions had already been planted, and Carol knew it would grow. Robert's voice cut through her haze. "We'll figure it out, Carol. You're not alone anymore." She met his eyes and nodded faintly. She wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was clear: this was only the beginning. Chapter 4: Dreams. As Carol settled in with Sheila's family, she couldn't help but notice the subtle, uneasy glances Sheila and Mia exchanged whenever they thought she wasn't looking. It was as though they were uncertain of how to act around her. Carol chose to ignore it, convincing herself she might be imagining things. The first night in Sheila's house was uneventful until Carol went to bed. Exhaustion quickly overtook her, but her sleep was far from peaceful. Disturbing visions plagued her dreams. One stood out vividly: she saw Mia and Sheila speaking in hushed, conspiratorial tones. "How are we going to get all the inheritance now? With Carol still alive, what are we going to do?" Mia's voice was filled with frustration. Sheila responded calmly, "The police already suspect foul play. If we try to harm her again, they might trace the source of the accident back to us." Mia's expression darkened. "Maybe we don't need her dead. What if we arrange for her to be kidnapped? The kidnappers could extort our grandparents for money, and then we could sell her off to a gang in Western Asia. We'd get a cut from the gang's profits too." Sheila's face grew thoughtful, and after a pause, she nodded. "That could work. Let me ask my boyfriend if he has any connections that can help us." Carol woke with a start, her heart pounding and her body drenched in a cold sweat. She sat up in bed, trying to steady her breathing. It had been so vivid. Too vivid. Could it have been just a dream? Or was it something more? Sheila was her aunt, harsh and distant perhaps, but would she truly go to such extremes? The idea seemed absurd, yet Carol couldn't shake the feeling that the dream was a warning. She spent the rest of the night staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. If the dream was a premonition, she needed to act. But who could she trust? Her grandparents were too old to handle something so dangerous, and Sheila's family clearly couldn't be trusted. Then, as if summoned by her thoughts, an image of Robert appeared in her mind. Steady, kind Robert. He had been her anchor through the chaos of her recovery. Yes, she decided. She would talk to Robert. If anyone could help her, it was him. Chapter 5: A Friend in Need is Friend Indeed. The air was heavy with tension as Carol sat under the towering oak tree in the schoolyard, her face pale and drawn. She hadn't been sleeping well. Every night, the same dream haunted her, shadows whispering, a flash of her Aunt Sheila's face, and a rising feeling of dread that left her gasping for breath when she woke. Her dreams had always been vivid, but these felt different, like warnings. She had kept them to herself for days until the anxiety became unbearable. That's when she decided to confide in Robert, her classmate and the only person she truly trusted. Robert listened intently, his brows furrowing deeper with every word she said. When she finished recounting her recurring dreams, his face darkened. He stood abruptly, pacing back and forth, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. "There's only one way to find out if there's some truth to your visions," he said finally, his voice firm. Carol blinked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" Without answering, Robert pulled out his phone and dialed his cousin. After a brief conversation, he ended the call and turned to her, his expression resolute. "I asked my cousin to investigate Sheila. If there's anything she's hiding, we'll find out." Carol stared at him, her heart pounding. "Why would you do that?" "You didn't have to." "Because I won't let anything happen to you," he interrupted, his voice softer now. He reached out and took her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "You deserve to feel safe, Carol. And if something's wrong, we'll fix it together." For the next few days, Robert stuck to his word. He walked Carol to and from school, keeping a watchful eye on her. His presence was a comfort, a shield against the unease that seemed to follow her everywhere. One afternoon, Robert's phone buzzed. It was his cousin. Robert's face grew grim as he listened. When he hung up, he turned to Carol, his jaw tight. "Sheila has a boyfriend," he said quietly. Carol froze, her mind racing. "What?" "My cousin found proof. Photos, hotel records. And there's more, Mia is involved too. There are pictures of them together, all three of them." The world seemed to tilt beneath Carol's feet. She wasn't surprised, not really. Her aunt had always been cold, resentful even, but this betrayal felt like a slap to the face. Robert didn't waste any time. He gathered the evidence his cousin had sent and compiled it into a neat package. That evening, he mailed it to George, Sheila's husband. The fallout was swift. By nightfall, George had confronted Sheila with the evidence. Carol could hear the shouting from her room, the muffled sound of accusations and denials. Then came the sound of suitcases being dragged down the stairs. When she peeked out of her window, she saw Sheila and Mia standing on the curb, their faces twisted with anger and humiliation as George slammed the door shut behind them. A knock at her door startled her. It was Robert. "You're not staying here," he said firmly, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. He helped her pack her belongings, his movements brisk but gentle. "But where will I go?" she asked, her voice trembling. "With me," he said simply. Robert's family welcomed Carol with open arms. His mother, a warm and nurturing woman, enveloped her in a hug the moment she stepped through the door. "You're home now, sweetheart," she said, her voice filled with kindness. At first, Carol felt out of place, like an intruder in someone else's life. But Robert's family quickly made her feel at ease. His mother doted on her, teaching her how to cook and sharing stories of her own childhood. Robert's father, a jovial man with a love for storytelling, entertained her with tales of his younger days. For the first time in years, Carol felt a sense of belonging. She laughed, she helped around the house, and she found joy in the little things, like sitting around the dinner table with Robert's family, sharing stories and jokes. Robert watched her blossom with quiet satisfaction, his feelings for her growing deeper with each passing day. He had always cared for her, but now, seeing her smile and hearing her laugh, he realized just how much she meant to him. Carol still had her dreams, but they no longer filled her with fear. Instead, they reminded her of how far she had come, and of the people who had stood by her when she needed them the most. In Robert's home, surrounded by love and acceptance, Carol finally felt safe. And for the first time in a long time, she dared to dream of a brighter future. Chapter 6, Plot. The night was cold, and the pale light of the moon filtered through the curtains as Carol tossed and turned in her bed. Her dreams had returned, but tonight's was more vivid than ever before. In the dream, she saw Sheila standing in a dimly lit room, her arms wrapped around a man Carol didn't recognize. He was tall, with a sly smirk and a menacing air about him. Mia stood nearby, her expression smug. The man spoke, his voice low and chilling. "Tomorrow, you must call her," he said, addressing Mia. "Tell her to meet you in the alley south of the fish market by 11 a.m. Once she's there, my men will handle the rest. They'll kidnap her, take her out of the country, and kill her. No ransom, no complications. After her death, the remaining assets will go to both of you. Tomorrow, your worries end." Carol's heart pounded as she watched Sheila cheer and kiss the man. "Thank you," Sheila said, her voice dripping with malice. "You helped me get rid of her parents, and now you're helping me get rid of her. I can finally erase all traces of my sister from this world." The man smirked and kissed Sheila passionately. "Anything for you, love." Carol woke up with a start, her breath ragged and tears streaming down her face. She couldn't stop crying, the weight of the nightmare pressing down on her like a boulder. Robert and his mother rushed into the room, alarmed by the sound of her sobs. Robert knelt beside her, gently taking her hands. "Carol, what happened? Tell us," he urged. Between shaky breaths, Carol recounted the dream, her voice trembling. As she finished, Robert's face turned pale, and his jaw clenched tightly. "I knew Sheila was a cruel woman, but this," he muttered, struggling to contain his anger. "This is beyond evil." He looked at Carol, his expression softening. "You don't need to worry. I won't let anything happen to you. We'll handle this together." The next morning, right on cue, Mia called Carol. Her voice was unusually sweet, dripping with false kindness. "Carol," Mia began, "I just wanted to apologize for how my mom and I have treated you. I realize now how wrong we were. I want to make it up to you. Can we meet and talk?" Carol's stomach churned, but she forced herself to sound calm. "Sure, Mia. Where do you want to meet?" There's an alley south of the fish market, Mia replied. Come there at 11 a.m., and we'll go to my friend's restaurant in town to talk. Carol's hands shook, but her voice remained steady. Okay. I'll be there. At 10:55 a.m., Mia called again, asking if Carol had arrived. Carol, still safe at home, replied, I'm almost there. At 11 a.m., Carol called Mia from her phone and said, I'm here, but I don't see you anywhere. Just wait a few minutes, Mia said eagerly. Carol hung up and, with a steady hand, sent a text message to Mia, Help me, Mia. There is someone here. Then, she turned off her phone. Mia, unable to contain her anticipation, immediately rushed to the alley. When she arrived, her heart sank. Instead of Carol, she found a group of men lurking in the shadows, their faces rough and their eyes cold. What's going on? Mia demanded, confused. The men didn't answer. Instead, one of them stepped forward and struck her hard, knocking her unconscious. Mia and Carol bore a striking resemblance to each other. The goons, mistaking Mia for their target, loaded her unconscious body into a van and carried out their grim plan. Hours later, Mia's lifeless body washed up near the beach. Meanwhile, Carol sat safely in Robert's home, her hands trembling as she held on to the edge of the couch. Robert sat beside her, his arm protectively around her shoulders. It's over, he said softly. They'll never hurt you again. Carol nodded, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. She had survived, but the cost of Sheila's betrayal had been steep. She couldn't bring herself to mourn Mia, but the weight of what had happened lingered like a shadow. As the sun set that evening, Carol realized one thing: the nightmare was finally over, and she was free. Chapter 7: Justice. Carol and Robert walked hand in hand into the police station. The events of the past few days had left Carol emotionally drained, but she was resolute. The nightmares, the schemes, the lies, they all needed to end. Sitting across from the detective, Carol recounted everything: her suspicions, the dreams, and the chilling events that unfolded after Mia's ill-fated call. Robert backed her up, providing the evidence they had gathered about Sheila's infidelity and the shady dealings with her boyfriend. The detective, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, listened attentively, taking notes. If what you're saying is true, she said, leaning forward, then Sheila and her accomplices have a lot to answer for. The investigation moved quickly. The police retrieved Sheila's phone records and uncovered a trove of incriminating evidence. Texts, calls, and location data tied her to the man Carol had seen in her dream, her boyfriend. From him, they tracked down the goons who had kidnapped and murdered Mia. But the most shocking discovery came when the police uncovered a deeper connection. Sheila's boyfriend had orchestrated the car accident that killed Carol's parents. It had all been part of Sheila's twisted plan to claim the family's inheritance. The courtroom was packed on the day of the sentencing. Carol sat quietly beside Robert, her hands clenched into fists as the judge read the verdict. Sheila, her boyfriend, and the hired goons were sentenced to 20 years in prison for conspiracy to commit murder, accessory to murder, and other charges. As Sheila was led away, she avoided Carol's gaze. But Carol saw the fear in her aunt's eyes, a fear that wouldn't fade. Inside the prison, Sheila quickly earned a grim nickname, the the daughter killer. The other inmates despised her, and she became a target. Whispers of her crimes followed her everywhere, and she lived each day in fear of retaliation. Meanwhile, George was a broken man. He had lost everything: his family, his home, his peace of mind. The sight of his daughter's lifeless body haunted him, and he blamed Sheila for all of it. Unable to bear the memories, George sold his possessions and left the country, seeking solace far from the place where his life had unraveled. Carol's grandparents were equally devastated. When they learned of Sheila's greed and the betrayal that led to their daughter's death, they were inconsolable. They traveled to meet Carol, their frail hands trembling as they held hers. "We failed you," her grandmother whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We didn't see the evil in Sheila's heart. Please, forgive us." Carol's heart ached for them. She hugged them tightly and assured them that she bore no resentment. Her grandparents, determined to make amends, rewrote their wills, leaving everything to Carol. Life began to take on a sense of normalcy again. Carol and Robert buried themselves in their studies, preparing for their college entrance exams. The bond between them grew stronger with each passing day. When they both received their acceptance letters to the same college, Robert decided it was time. One evening, as they sat together on a park bench watching the sun dip below the horizon, he turned to her, his expression serious yet soft. "Carol," he began, taking her hand in his. "You've been through so much, and I've tried to be there for you through it all. But there's something I've been meaning to ask you." Carol's heart fluttered. "What is it?" Robert took a deep breath. "Will you be my girlfriend?" A smile broke across Carol's face, and without hesitation, she nodded. "Yes, Robert. I would love that." As they embraced, Carol felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. For the first time, her future felt bright, unclouded by the darkness of the past. With Robert by her side, she was ready to start a new chapter, a chapter filled with hope, love, and the promise of a better tomorrow.